بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, Your Excellencies, our dear guests, good morning. On behalf of Dr. Jamal Sanad Al-Suwaidi, Director General of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and uh, Research, I'm glad to welcome you today in the proceedings of the second day of the 23rd Annual Conference of Future Studies. We would like to note that you will find on your seats and in your email a survey regarding the annual conference, Future Studies. So could you please fill out the survey since we highly appreciate your comments and feedback to develop further in the future. We start now by the keynote address by Mr. Thomas Frey, futurist speaker, founder of executive director of Da Vinci Institute, Colorado, United States of America. Let's welcome him to the stage.
Good morning. It's a great honor to be here with you today. We're a very backward-looking society. We're backward-looking because it's just human nature. See, we've all personally experienced the past. It's just human nature because all of us, when we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. In fact, all information we come into contact with is essentially history. So the past is very knowable, and yet we're going to be spending the rest of our lives in the future. So it's almost as if we're walking backwards into the future. My job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So we're going to do that here this morning. My name is Thomas Frye. I work as a futurist out of Denver, Colorado. And we spend a lot of time thinking about the future. And it is a great honor for me to be here with you today. I'm going to talk about 3 technologies and how they tie into this topic of search engines for the physical world. So it'll be flying drones, it'll be sensor technology, and it'll be artificial intelligence. But there's actually many more technologies involved than just those 3. So let's start with the flying drone topic. A couple years ago, I wrote a paper on 192 future uses for flying drones. I started off by asking the central question of if we added a video projector to a drone, what kind of capabilities would that give us? And I was thinking about, well, if we added a video projector, then we could use it maybe at concerts, at visual art performances. But then it occurred to me that if we had a video projector on a drone, if there was somebody that we wanted to target for a special marketing campaign, we could fly a drone in front of them and put an image on the ground or on a wall, and it could become the most annoying form of advertising ever invented. So we're pretty sure we don't want to go there. But then it occurred to me that every new feature we add to a drone gives it additional capability. So what capabilities do we get if we add speakers to a drone? How about microphones or infrared filters or sensors to a drone? How about if we add robotic arms to a drone? What capabilities does that give us? Or if we put lasers on a drone? What if we put wheels on it so it can drive on the ground as well as fly in the air? We could have an umbrella on a drone and it could just fly over our head and keep the rain off of us whenever it started raining. If we go running at night, we could have a drone that lights up the path in front of us. Or how about if we put a tow line on a drone? We could actually have it pull us around. Does that look like fun? When it comes to sensors, we have sensors that are kind of cropping up in lots of different areas. So this guy, Dr. Janis Burzek, was a vice president of Fairchild Semiconductor. In 2013, he decided to hold an event called the Trillium Sensor Summit. And they were charged with trying to see how many at what year will we reach the first trillion sensors in the world? So to give you a sense, sensors are anything that can sense heat, light, humidity, millions of different things we can detect with sensors. This looks like a little simple skin patch, like a little Band-Aid on our arm, but it's actually a very sophisticated piece of technology with lots of information coming and going. So the first smartphone, the iPhone, when it first came out in 2007, had 5 sensors in it. The average smartphone today has roughly 20 sensors in it. So the number of sensors in a smartphone is doubling every 4 years. So they came up with the prediction that by 2022, we're going to reach the first trillion sensors in the world, and that by 2036, we will reach 100 trillion sensors in the world. Now, what this means is the sensors are becoming very tiny, very easy to mass produce, very ubiquitous, very inexpensive. We'll start embedding sensors in coatings like paint. We'll paint our walls with them. We'll paint our bridges. We'll paint our cars with them. We'll have information coming from everywhere. Artificial intelligence. This is, we're on the brink of this revolution that's going to change us dramatically in ways that we haven't imagined yet. Artificial intelligence is actually the work that's been done on hundreds of different topics, and it's all kind of converging right now. It's all, after many, many decades of research, it's all coming together. Some of the early adopters are going to be healthcare, driverless technology, the power industry, Internet of Things, 3D printing, and much more. Now, when we think about drones, drones are not just going to be a single drone flying overhead. There will be multiple drones. We'll have fleets of drones, which will give rise to lots of organizations having their own fleets of drones. Every city will have their own fleet of drones. Every college, every police department, every sports team, news organization, farmers, airports, theme parks, all of them will have their own fleets of drones. So when we think about a drone command center, and these will crop up in lots of places in the near future, this is kind of the image that comes to our head, but a future drone command center might look more like this, or maybe like this. We don't know exactly what a future drone command center is going to look like. But if we assume that sometime in the future we're going to have 50,000 drones flying over the average city on a daily basis, then a lot of questions come to mind. So what's the role and responsibility of a city for managing those drones? And what are the legal privacy barriers that come along with it? So who has the right to shoot a drone out of the air? I think that's a fundamental question, but more importantly, when do we have an obligation to shoot a drone out of the air? At what point is a drone menacing or causing problems and we have to make a decision to shoot it out of the air? So if I show you this drone here, which this is a drone that's trying to burn trash off of a power line, how do we know if it's just burning trash off a power line or whether it's trying to cut through the power lines altogether? And who makes that decision? These are discussion points that nobody's been dealing with just yet. So cities will employ fleets of drones, and these drones will be scanning the cities on a regular basis. So once we're able to do that with the sensors, with the drones, with artificial intelligence, we will start to create these digital models of the cities. And these digital models will get much better over time. Now, once we have really good digital models that are refreshed on a regular basis, we'll be able to search on attributes that are not something we can search on today. We'll be able to search on smells, on tastes, on barometric pressures, on harmonic vibrations. I want something with this texture. I want something with this level of reflectivity, with this specific gravity. Now, we won't have to know how it's doing the searching. It will just have that capability. So we put in the search question, and the artificial intelligence will interpret it in ways so that the search engine will find whatever we're looking for. So search engines for the physical world, we will be able to put in queries like, did the tornado cause damage to City Hall 10 minutes ago? Where is that dog with rabies right now? What is the heaviest traffic intersection in the city today? What caused the fire at 22nd and Oak Street? If we have issues with stalkers, how close did John Doe get to Jane Doe yesterday? And then do infrastructure reports. What's the most dangerous bridge in the city today? So we can have all of this information right at our fingertips, just using these search engines for the physical world. Now, these search engines are going to be in common use 10 years from now. So we're going to reach the first billion drones in the world, roughly in 2030. The number of drones getting created is going up exponentially. It's quite fascinating to watch this happen. But the future is ours to write. So we're entering a period of unprecedented opportunity. So why is this so important? This is important because humanity is going to change more in the next 20 years than in all human history. At the same time, as we get more and more dependent on technology, things are going to go wrong. So our risk factors are going to go up exponentially. And our children's children, who haven't even been born yet, they're counting on you. They're counting on the people in this room to make great decisions. As Steve Jobs says, right now is one of those moments when you are influencing the future. But sometimes our best efforts just look a lot like this. Yeah, pretty much just like that. So a quick plug for my new book, Epiphany Z, which is available in major bookstores right now. And for those of you who want more information about what we do at the Da Vinci Institute, feel free to contact me. I'll sign you up for a free newsletter. And I thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. الآن مع استراحة لمدة.
Now we move for a 5 minutes break, and then we will start to resume the proceedings of the conference.
قبل أن نبدأ استكمال أعمال الجلسة الثالثة نود الإشارة ضيوفنا الكرام إلى أنكم سوف تجدون.
Before starting, we would like to tell you that, and on your seats and in your email, a survey regarding this conference. Please do fill in the form, because we do appreciate and we look forward to reading your feedback and input. We're going to start now the third session of the Future of Politics and International Relations. I'm going to leave you with His Excellency Dr. Faisal Al-Ayan, the Executive Vice President of Rabdan University, the United Arab Emirates. Peace be upon you all. Your Excellency Al-Suwaidi, the General Director of the ECSSR, thank you for welcoming me here in the 23rd annual conference of the Future Studies under the title The Future of Politics and International Relations. It's my honor and pleasure to be the chair, the head chair, the panel chair of this session. And we're going to open the panel for discussion at the end of the session. We're going to talk about the solutions for the fourth generation. About the chairman, one of his most famous sayings is that war is using or doing politics using other tools, but regardless of your allies, regardless of the different war schools and armies do unite on the concept of that they don't do politics. However, our enemies always, and this is his sayings, enemies are always adopting new methods, and different groups like ISIS and Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and some countries like North Korea, Russia, Iran, and Qatar as well, they all adopt the policy of war is politics. We all know the theory of the second, third, and war generations policies, which has to do with how to use armies in the best way. And we noticed that the first three generations of wars were focused on armed conflict, which means that the country would arm its forces in the best of its capabilities and then to face its opponents in order to achieve a political aim at the end of the day. And in order for a country to go in a war against or versus another country, they both have to they both admit the legitimacy of the existence of each other. However, they don't agree on the same points. So in order to economy and policy is a different matter, and it has nothing to do with the first, second, and third war generation or generation of war. And it the fourth or the fifth war has a different refuses the current situation in any country of the world. So any individual or country government utilizes all available tools, including political and economical and in some cases violence, in order to bring down a regime and replace it with another. And they use all the components in order to prepare for a solid strategy in order to enhance their capabilities to resist. And we may see Russia's usage of the Little Green Men, their famous armed force, and Iran as well, that has established both organized and unorganized armed forces in order to preserve and to export the revolution, the Khomeini revolution, and Qatar, which has become a main supporter of terrorist groups, and New York Times and Qatar has paid these astronomical figures for groups like Al-Nusra, which varied between $700,000 to $700 million up to $1 billion. So, but it
Qatar now is
العنف والكراهية عبر شبكة الجزيرة وتعاونها مع إيران وتركيا. ومن هنا نستطيع القول بأن هذه الدول تسعى لتغيير الوضع الراهن، ولذا نجدها تخلق فوضى سياسية. فالأدوات السياسية والعسكرية والأمنية للدولة الحديثة هائلة ومرعبة ومكلفة أيضا، ويبدو أنها تدعم فكرة أن الحرب والسياسة تظلا طرف النطاق للدولة المركزية، بل حتى السياسة التقليدية مكلفة أيضا. فالمرشحان لانتخابات الرئاسة الأمريكية عام 2016 أنفقا على الحملة الانتخابية أكثر من 942 مليون دولار أمريكي، أي ما يعادل 3.4 مليار درهم كما رأينا في الإعلام. وكما قرأنا في الصحف الأمريكية فإن أقل من ثلث هذا المبلغ والذي هو 275 مليون دولار أمريكي، أي ما يعادل مليار درهم إماراتي، قد أنفقته مجموعات خارجية، أي مجموعات ليس لها علاقة بالحملة الانتخابية، لتأييد أحد المرشحين دون أن يكون لأي من المرشحين سلطان على أي منهما. هذا الانتقال من التحكم المركزي إلى نظام أكثر سيولة هو أدق ما يصف حروف الجيل الرابع. المجتمع المدني من خلال الإعلام طبعا ذكر أن فقدان التحكم في إنفاق مبلغ كبير كالذي أنفقته الحملة الانتخابية 2016 له أمر موجع ويعتبر كارثة، مما أثار القلق والتشكيك في شرعية الانتخابات، وإن كنا نرى أمورا مشابهة في الحروب. وكما فقدت الأحزاب السياسية السيطرة على العملية الانتخابية، فإن الدول التي تسعى إلى قيادتها فقدت هي الأخرى شرعية احتكار استعمال العنف وتركته للحركة الغير شرعية والتنظيمات الإرهابية والمجموعات الخارجة عن القانون والتي يتزايد عددها مع الوقت. كما أن الوصول الغير مكلف للعملية السياسية والأسلحة الخفيفة وأجهزة الحاسب الآلي المحمولة والطائرات بدون طيار المتاحة تجاريا يتساوى ذلك مع استعمال الهواتف النقالة وشبكات التواصل الاجتماعي من حيث تقليل عوائق الدخول في الصراع بجانب إتاحة الأسلحة.
all of these allowed the violent groups to reach the general procedures and reach their goals in order to use the fifth generation of war, which is what is beyond the organized military forces or armed forces. We need to understand that the goal of the fourth generation of war is not the army as it used to be in the previous three generations. The purpose of fifth generation is to destroy the society, and that is to raise conflicts between the societies and communities as well as the governments in order to topple the stability of the country. That led that governments and countries are starting to find new tools to protect the communities. And we see here that some of the fifth generation wars have hit Nice, Barcelona, Frankfurt, and also some parts of the USA and Europe. So terrorist groups are trying to face the security measurements using the modern technology. They don't really need training centers as what we've seen in the 80s and 90s in Afghanistan, like Farouk Center to train guerrilla war, and therefore they starting to use the modern technology in order to launch attacks on civilians. They don't really differentiate between Arab or European or Western, Muslim or Christian or even Jewish. So they just kill and for the sake of killing. So they are transferring the everyday tools and material and transfer it into weapons. And they want to kill the feeling of security and safety between the members of the community and raise conflicts and struggles between the communities and each other. And that is causing more trouble for governments to protect them. We need, as countries, to understand the matter of sovereignty. And in Syria, for example, we know that the Assad regime lost its legitimate right as the ruler of the country. Yet he believes that he still has the legitimacy, and he is saying that he is the rightful leader, saying that the evidence for that is that people are immigrating or evacuating the war zones. Yet we should know that people are evacuating because the system or the regime is targeting civilians and forcing them to move away of their homes. So the target of the resistance is not to, of course, to topple. They need to topple Bashar al-Assad, but also they have certain negative effects on neighboring countries like Turkey and other countries. They cause, and the war in Syria in general causes instability in the region. And the Syrians now are, we can see them that are all now refugees. And these refugees are going to hosting countries, and the Syrians are now are mixed with other immigrants traveling to through Europe, and of course they are targeting Germany, Austria, and other countries as well. And there are other countries who refuse hosting. They refuse hosting immigrants from Syria, and that of course causes further problems. Now the use of modern technology is very essential in armies now, and we see now something that is worrying us all. We see the some endeavors from Russia to affect, somehow it is said now that Russians are able to affect the results of the presidential elections, and probably they weren't able to do that, but the target, regardless of the result, their target was to cause a sense of insecurity and lack of confidence between the people and the government. So now the countries are using certain types of alliances, using the cyberspace and they want to, and actually the Russians were not able to maybe intervene in the elections, yet they were able to cause a diplomatic and political scandal. This is the key to understand the fourth generation of wars, which is an indirect way to weaken the status of a country through a fourth party, in a way that weakens the country's ability to resist or fight back without using the regular army force or the armed forces, but using other means. So to answer this question, it's not a security question, rather than it is an answer that requires focus on general stability and security. In order to face these types of generation, the fifth and fourth generation of wars is something that needs to be tackled by the entire system of the private and public systems, as well as the civil societies, in order for them to, and we need to arm them with the required tools and technologies in order for them to be able to tackle and face such attacks. Now I call Dr. John Lucemon to provide a short or brief presentation regarding the future of stability, the political stability in the fourth and fifth generations of warfare. He is an associate professor, National Defense College, United Arab Emirates. Let's welcome him. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I will be speaking in Arabic. Advance for the interpreters. سيداتي وسادتي في البداية.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the beginning, I would like to thank the ECSSR and his director, His Excellency Dr. Jamal Sanad al-Suwaidi, for this invitation. This is a big honor to me. In my lecture, I'm going to talk about political stability in its strategic framework, in the strategic framework that we are living through today, especially political stability in the aftermath of the fifth generation war. In the last Manama event, Dr. Anwar Gargash, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the UAE, has mentioned the importance of stability for the Middle East, especially the need to deal with the security challenges in the region, and the main role of the UAE and its alliance and its allies like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Egypt. If we want to understand the challenges to the political stability in the Arab world today, we should talk about the security aspects and the transformation in the last 2 decades. That's why in my lecture I would like to focus on the effects of the change of the nature of war on the political stability in the Middle East today. First, I'm going to talk about the nature of the new war, and I'm going to ask the following question. Are we living in the age of the fifth generation war? And how can we describe the components of this fifth generation? Second, I'm going to talk about the details of the new war in the region, especially through the regional military strategy that is being done by Iran in Iraq, Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon. Lastly, we're going to discuss how can Arab countries preserve or bring back the political or the regional stability under these challenges. According to the American military thinkers like Thomas Hams, we live in the generation of the fifth war generation, and we can dissect or categorize the modern war history into four stages or generations. The first generation was from 1803 till 1815 in Europe, when countries depended on the human power in their battles, like the wars of Napoleon. The first generation of war is considered the beginnings of the emergence of the modern military system and having large national armies. To compare, in Agincourt, in the Battle of Agincourt, in 1415, there were 5,500 soldiers. In 1812, when Napoleon entered Russia, he had 450,000 soldiers. Afterwards, there were the second generation war, which focused on heavy arm fire, which was the result of the Industrial Revolution in the second half of the 19th century. And the First World War is considered the best example for this generation of wars. Afterwards, we had the third generation of wars, to be a reaction to the wars in Europe during the first, especially at the beginning of the first World War, and in Germany in the Second World War, and through what we call was called Blitzkrieg battle, which has been done by the German army in France in 1940 under the leadership of Heinz Guderian. This military strategy has led to the this strategy has led to the victory of Germany over France after a few weeks only. This is a reply or a reaction to the trench war. The fourth generation of war, the guerrilla warfare, was not American or Russian, but it was Chinese in essence. The Mao guerrilla warfare battle started in 1949. Afterwards, we had mutiny movements in Vietnam and Latin America, and also the two Palestinian intifadas versus Israel. And we can see that in Iraq in between 2003 and 2008 against the American forces as an example for the fourth generation of war. If we want to use so through the use of the concept of the generations of war, we can understand the development of the art of war in the last 3 centuries. First, the participation of people and the presence of national citizen soldiers in the military organizations during the Napoleon War battles or wars. Then we saw the effect of the Industrial Revolution on war, especially the fire power on the battlefield during the First World War. Third, sudden attack or sudden war, as Germany has done in 1940. Fourth, guerrilla warfare or the untraditional warfare for the mutiny movements in Asia and the Middle East. Now we come to our current security, and the main question: Are we witnessing a new transformation for the art of war? Today we live in the generation of the fifth war, or what we call hybrid warfare, as we have seen in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East and the Gulf area. First, this forms of hybrid warfare has came to existence in the Middle East in 2006 when Hezbollah fought Israel for the first time. A non-governmental organization like Hezbollah was able to launch a war against a new or a modern country like Israel. In addition, the style of warfare of Hezbollah in 2006 mixed in between the untraditional dimension of the first generation wars, like the guerrilla warfare, and the traditional dimension, like launching ballistic rockets targeting North Israel. So, through the July war in 2006, the art of war has changed again. So, in Europe, this hybrid war started during the first or during the same time, and specifically in 2007, when Estonia was under a major or electronic attack on its governmental entities as a reaction from the of the Russian piracy movement, the hackers. Afterwards, Estonia decided to remove the. This came in a retaliation after Estonia removed a statue from the center of the capital, Tallinn, that shows a Soviet soldier from the Second World War. This incident was launched the beginning of the electronic warfare and for the utilization of or the use of Russia for non-governmental movements or groups to defend its benefits. A year after, Russia showcased their capabilities in hybrid warfare through its conflict with Georgia in August 2008. Moscow took unconventional means and conventional means in that war. They used militias in Ossetia and Abkhazia in a guerrilla warfare operation under the Georgian governmental forces. And at the same time, Russia started a traditional military intervention at its borders with Georgia, and it used electronic means through targeting, through operation that targeted governmental locations in Georgia, or targets in Georgia. So after the crisis in Estonia and the war between Russia and Georgia, military researchers ask the important question: do we see a transformation in the arts of another transformation in the arts of war? Years after this conflict in Georgia, General Krasimov, the head of the Russian armed forces in 2003, spoke to the Russian press about the new military belief for Russia, which we call a hybrid warfare. Krasimov assured the transformation of the art of war, especially the mixture between traditional and untraditional war. The interview with Krasimov has been published or aired a year before the mangrove attack. So a lot of reviewers in the West saw the speech of Krasimov as a prediction. In reality, the mangrove attack and the war of Ukraine in 2014 has showcased a new stage, a new era towards the fifth generation, or what we call the hybrid war. And as we have seen in Ukraine, a clear coordination between the militias and the Russian regularly armed forces. So when we look at the Middle East, we ask the two following questions: are we in front of the component? Are we witnessing the components of the fifth generation war in the Arab world? And thus, what are the challenges regarding political stability? I've talked about the presence of hybrid war in the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006, and today Iran is setting a strategic or implementing hybrid military strategy in the region clearly. First, Iran is using militias to launch undirected military operations like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq and the ethnic militants or militias in Syria. And in Yemen, it increased its military support to the Houthis, especially in the rocket field. So we see the strategic influence of Iran in all the battles in the region. Regarding the marine aspect in the Gulf, the Iranian forces and especially the the Islamic Revolution Army or guards are using an unprecedented strategy in the Hormuz area through the spread of the marine through the marine power or the marine forces of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards and its submarines and its ships that are armed with ballistic rockets. So in Iran, we see the hybrid war. This was all in the Strait of Hormuz. So we see the hybrid warfare in Iran, which means using the revolutionary armed guards in two ways. First, to stop the entrance into the Hormuz Strait and the military training for the militias of the ethnic militias in the region. So we see this comparison between the Iranian strategy in a clear way. We see that they are using military and unmilitary resources and both governmental and non-governmental sources. In this kind of war, there are no borders between the battlefield and the cities and the villages where citizens reside. And this new war is not going to be as traditional as the First and Second World War of the previous century. And it's not going to be guerrilla warfare like the Vietnam one, but it's going to be a mixture, a merging of both styles. And this is the accurate meaning to hybrid warfare.
اوكي شكرا. الآن كيف نستطيع
How can we preserve stability in the region? As the speech of Dr. Anwar Gargash through the previous Manama discussion, the UAE has a main role in the Arab world for regional stability. That's why it's important to discuss the political measurements that can protect the region from the Iranian hybrid war. First, we have to stop the presence of the security vacuum in or gap in Arab countries like Yemen, Libya, Syria, or Iraq, where Iran is going to take advantage of the weakness of the governmental entities and security entities to spread its dominance and its influence. On the long run, the support and the empowering of the armies in these countries were going to have a major role in prohibiting or limiting the intervention of military or rather terroristic organizations or groups and Iran. That's why we have to prepare these countries for and to support them and support the legitimate forces against any foreign intervention. This is going to be by supporting and training the Yemeni army, which is going to have a decisive role to preserve the political stability of the country. And we can apply the same thing for the it can move over to Libya, and that's why the strategic political strategy needs a regional and a complete strategy. At the end, we have to rethink the of the regional regime to stand against the foreign intervention in Arabic affairs. In the 17th century, in Europe, diplomats found a way to defend their borders and to stop and prevent foreign intervention in their internal matters through the Treaty of Westphalia. In my opinion, I think the Middle East needs the same project today to protect regional stability. It's possible today through the establishment of alliances, the establishment of the new alliance between the UAE and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as the first stage to create a new regional system for the Arab world, with having two goals. First of all, to enhance the governmental entities in the Arab world and to protect stability against the current challenges. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Jahan. And now I would like to invite Dr. Omar Al-Abaidali to present his presentation regarding international relations in the post-globalization era. Omar Al-Ubaidali is the head of the he is the head of the Dirasat Center in Bahrain for International Studies.
In the name of Allah, peace be upon you all, I would like to thank the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research and His Excellency Dr. Gamal Al-Suwaidi for the invitation. The current political trends are the marketalism and the protectionism, isolationism, and it is present in the policies of Donald Trump and in the Brexit of the United Kingdom to exit the European Union. This is not the first time we witness such trends. We've seen it in the interwar era, the First and Second Wars. There is a quote from Voltaire that summarizes the human nature, which is such then is the human condition to wish guarantees for one's country is to wish harm to one's neighbors. The main topic of this presentation, this brief presentation, is that to be anti-free trade is natural and support technological progress is also natural, but to hold both positions simultaneously is a contradiction. Actually, unfortunately, policymakers and citizens do not understand this, and that push them towards bad policies, as the policies that I've mentioned earlier. The underlying reason is that people do not understand the economics of free trade and other similar topics like migration and FDI. And the result is that the international cooperation is destroyed, as we're witnessing today. This phenomenon requires a campaign of economic education. The principles of free trade. That's a brief presentation about it. 99% of goods and services that you consume every day are produced by someone else. If you had to be self-sufficient, you would have to work for 20 hours a day to avoid death, as cavemen. So you can't really depend on buying goods and services. If we cannot buy goods and services from others, our life would be miserable. So if you had civilizations is marked by creation of agriculture surplus that permits specialization in advanced goods. How does modern civilizations are established? The specialization in productions has more advantages. It makes the economic pie bigger. So it allows the producers to focus on producing what they are good at and allows producers to exploit economies of scale. For example, Saudi Arabia and Japan, they have oil. Saudi Arabia has oil and exports it, while at the same time it does not produce developed goods and services. While Japan, they have developed goods, but they don't have oil. So if we impose self-sufficiency on each country, it's going to be the life level is going to be welfare is going to be lowered. So each country is using what it has best in order to elevate their status. So technological progress and specialization of production and global trade are the reasons why we are hundreds of times richer than the Middle Ages. As Dr. John said, the Industrial Revolution and the period afterwards, with the technological development and the spread of free trade and free trade exchange, these are the reasons why we are living now in much more comfortable life than the Middle Ages. Who imposes tariffs hurts himself. This is a very basic lesson that is not clear to the United States at the current time. So suppose that during your next trip to the grocery store, you imposed 25% of tariff on your purchase. For example, if the chicken costs $4, you pay $5. If that sounds ridiculous and it doesn't make any sense and counterproductive, then you understand why tariffs hurt the countries that impose them. So such a tariff will make you wastefully decrease purchases from the store and wastefully produce more time at home to compensate. So if I want to buy a sandwich from the grocery store in order to save time, now I'm going to spend a lot of time in making the sandwich at home. And the same principle applies to countries when they impose tariffs. So why does countries impose tariffs, since it is a hurtful process? There is a clear distinction between a country and a person. So countries are made of not one person. So when Trump, for example, imposes steel tariffs, the domestic economy shrinks. But the rising steel prices helps steel producers to secure a large slice of the shrinking pie. Secondly, it helps workers who have invested in steel production skills but who have lost their jobs due to global competition. To summarize, what happens on the country level is that a small segment of society benefits from at the expense of the society as a whole. And the modern political systems are prone to small organized lobbies. That is a gap existing in each international global system that we have now, that a very strong organized lobby may impact the power, while the entire community may suffer from the lack of organization and they are not able to form effective lobbies. So if you look at the steel in the USA, the lobby of steel production, the number of participants are very limited and they are able to organize themselves and pose pressure on Trump and the policymaker, while the general community and all the other people working in the steel industry are not able to be organized enough to have a lobby or to exert lobby pressure to combat such policies. So the World Trade Organization's job is specialized in preventing this economic lunacy. How can we relate that to the technological progress? So the same principles are related to the technological progress. So the technological progress is defined as the ability to produce more using the same resources or new resources. Just like the removal of tariffs at the level of society, technological progress creates a small group of losers despite society as a whole benefiting. For example, producers of obsolete competing products and the workers who have invested in skills from obsolete technology. And the people who, and as well as, for example, we are going to say the digital photography and cars, for example. These are obsolete technologies and obsolete products. So these are currently used now. The mobile phones, cameras we all use. So in the 90s, we used to use traditional cameras and then go and get the pictures done from Kodaks in order to have them in paper. But that is obsolete now. So a very small group of people, they've lost, but we welcome technological development. For example, when humanity invented cars, for example, in the beginning, it used to be carriages being dragged by horses. Later on, it started. The humanity invented automobiles and stuff like that. So these are contradictory positions. A lot of people are against free trade and support policies like tariffs, as Trump is doing, and that is a clear policy. For example, that we can see United Kingdom and Brexit are doing this. They believe that free trade is a conspiracy, and so one of the reasons, the main reasons why Trump is elected is that they feel that there are some sort of conspiracy to exclude the lower or poor people in the community. So they don't, but at the same time, they support technological progress as almost universal. And for example, the word Luddite is considered an insult, and that was a group after the Industrial Revolution when devices for texture and fabrics have been developed. They used to there was a group of people, the Luddite, used to break the devices, and Luddite became an insult as a person who does not welcome technology. But a person who believes that in the conspiracy is a logical person, and that is a contradiction. So this is clear evidence of policymakers and normal people failing to understand basic economic principles. And how does that impact, and what are the implications of international relations? For most of the last 40 years, the World Trade Organization and governments have been able to use economic cooperation and free trade as a base for greater cooperation in non-economic areas. Even countries that thinks that the United Nations is not neutral are keen to cooperate economically, like China, Iran, and Russia. If economic cooperation begins to break down, the likelihood of military conflict increases, because actually both at the level of individual and country, commerce builds relationships and makes people think positively toward others. We have thinkers like David Smith and and others like him. They feel that commerce builds bridges and enhances relations between others. It's an operation that allows both parties to win and elevate their status of living. And that shows a very good foundation to build international and political relations between countries. So, And it's not an exaggeration to say that if the commerce relations break down, this is going to cause military invasion. As we can see during the Great Depression, the commerce breakdown caused the spread of xenophobia, and that affected the international community, and the result was catastrophic. So what is the solution? The world needs a long-term economic education project. That's my opinion. Teaching children the benefits of global commerce should become like teaching them the importance of human rights or the importance of protecting the environment. We must also enable and strengthen the relevant global organizations like the United Nations, World Bank, IMF, WTO, as I mentioned before. And also a rules-based system of international relations should be established. So before the current situation or the current time, we were not. We can bear the fact that a certain category in the community may not be able to understand the economic rules. But after the economic shrinkage that happened in 1930, people started to doubt the importance of free trade and international cooperation in the economic field. And that is human nature to fear foreigners and to fear what they don't know. That's xenophobia in a word. So it was not just a passed by phenomenon. Actually, it stayed and it started to affect the international relations. And now we see that the international system that allowed for economic flourishing and a very peaceful situation in most of the countries, that is now threatened, and it's a real threat. And we need to tackle this on the long term through teaching children in an early age that international relations and global commerce is the tools for prosperity in the century, in the 21st century, and it's very essential. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Dr. Omar Al-Vedli. And now, with a presentation about the future threats with Dr. Mohammed Kuwaiti. He is an executive advisor, Signal Intelligence Agency, and he has a PhD in computer science and networks security from Washington University in USA, and he also has a master's from Khalifa Science and Research University. Thank you very much. Peace be upon you all.
Your Excellency, Dr. Jamal Sanad, ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed attendants, I would like to thank you first for having me here, and of course the ACSSR. Through 23 years, every day they were foreseeing the future, foreseeing what will happen, what will come in the future, God's willing. We heard today from His Excellency the Doctor and the participants here how technology plays a major role, or a main role, a big role in our society, in our future societal life. I had a lecture a week ago in a setting we had. I was with my children playing GTA, Call of Duty or Battlefield in the PlayStation, and this is a warfare game, and the violence in it reaches to the levels where they teach someone, may God preserve us all, how to suicide, how to commit how to kill themselves and cut their own throats. And we saw even children going to the bridge and throwing themselves from the. And every time they die in the game, they can have an extra life. So we were wondering, why does the child throwing themselves? And he said, I want to suicide. So I said, is this guy talking for serious? So he said, yes, I want to suicide. I want to learn this game in order to do it in real, to implement it in real life. Can you see to which extent gaming and education and being presented with our current and technology. I'm going to give a general view of the development of technology. Our forefathers have suffered a lot, and they were loyal in providing everything in order for us to reach where we have reached today when it comes to technology and development. And our leaders as well have, in order to increase, have done their best to elevate us and to develop us as a country and as people. In order to venture into the future, we have to go back into the past and to see the communication revolution. We have a 3.2 average of cell phones held by each user here in the UAE. So we started it by sending signals between tribes. This is how communication started, by sending signals from one tribe to another to warn them from a threat. Then we used pigeons and birds, and then TV and radio stations and satellites. And today we have an e-cloud where all the information is in the e-cloud and we can communicate through it. Games have also went from social games to physical games we used to play with our children, with our friends, to intelligence games and to games that we are using today, and then video games. This with development came up, but your choice of such games is the main thing here. And now we have video realities or virtual realities that can bring you to a very realistic situation. And from small devices, we've developed all the way to watches or even glasses that you can see things through them that you didn't even think that we can, and robotics, from massive robots that we couldn't utilize them in any, and we've reached to Sophia today. Sophia, the world's first robotic citizen, and how she can learn new things through time. Currencies, which has also affected us, we used to exchange through exchanging goods in between. This is back in ancient times, and now we've reached metal coins and paper currencies and bit cards or virtual cards, or rather currencies that threaten a lot of our economies. One entity or one group was able to pull $500 million through a hack. The concepts and definitions have changed. We used to talk about the security of a device, of the computer. We moved to network safety or security, then information security, and now we're cyber security, and now we're talking about resilience security, regardless of where you live and regardless of what kind of attack you're going to be facing. Our government, thank goodness, and may God preserve our leaders and our wise leadership, is developing also with all of this technological development. We witnessed lately how we've launched the artificial intelligence strategy, and also secure and smart cities that we are living in them currently, and the future that's going to facilitate a lot of these things. We have connected cities, interconnected cities, with their various sects through Wi-Fi or any 5G technologies, the modern or the new 5G technologies that are emerging. In 2020, we're going to have more than 50 billion smart objects. We're not just talking about drones or coffee machines, but all kinds of devices that you see that all around you and that are connected to the net. And our country, thank goodness, in telecommunication has reached high levels internationally, and social networks have more usage from 18 to 29. This is the age group, and in some other studies it's up to 30, and they benefit and utilize these social networks in whatever they need to do, whether it's a homework or through communication with others. So today, a person wakes up in the morning to the point where he sleeps at night. We use a lot of devices that are that have changed, if it hadn't changed already, to the Internet of Things, which understand your way of life. So it gets a lot of data or information about it. In 60 seconds, in some studies in 2017, within 1 minute, in 60 seconds, you see millions of images and videos that are being used. So we have higher usage of images and videos. Of course, we have pluses and minuses or threats to our life today. And there's a lot of studies that have focused on the negatives. I'm going to focus briefly on the major electronic threats: cybercrime, cyber terrorism, in addition to cyber warfare. Cyber crimes are many, like forgery and cursing and all kinds of cyber crimes that our children sometimes are being exposed to, like blackmail. Or you get a phone call, let's say, that you won a certain prize, or an email that you won something, when it's really it's all fraud. Cyber terrorism, like financing, recruiting, the spread of bad thoughts, and trying to infiltrate and to recruit this new generation, like what you see in YouTube and through all of these social networks, in which have a lot of this that broadcast a lot of these things, which affect our youth today. So our newspapers today also contain a lot of things that our youth are exposed to, and our generation today, may God preserve them, have been recruited by ISIS in 2015 to 2017 in the UAE. The Mumbai terror attacks showcases how technology was used, or electronic devices, electronic means have been used. We have an operation room where they used Google search. They had the BlackBerry decoding in order to decode their messages and their communications, and we had or rather to code them, and they had how 10 terrorists affected millions of citizens in that city. Cyber wars are a lot, as you can see today, like psychological warfare, like electronic or cyber wars, and espionage, and all kinds of like the cyber attack that occurred in both on Estonia and in Georgia. The Iranian cyber threat, as His Excellency Dr. Faisal has mentioned, that the Iranian part is active in the cyber part. A lot of the cyber threats, like the one that had occurred to Aramco, in which they were able to like the Shamoon attack, in which they targeted infrastructure and economical infrastructure for these countries. But the trend has changed now, from destruction to espionage and data or information collection. And we have also to command and control, to know the movements of the targets or any other thing. This is their trend and their targeting way of targeting. And there's a lot of other cyber attacks that you can read about. So some of those future threats they're varied, they're a lot, and they can be positive or negative. We can analyze this data in a good way. However, they are also they can be used as a threat against us if we cannot use artificial intelligence in a good way, smart cities and the Internet of Things, there's a lot of gaps, and if they are not well protected, they're going to be threats to us. And also drones and other devices that can affect us today as a country. So who can control the software of these and the programming of these devices are going to control the world, including the ones that has to do with the codes. Some of the new models of threats that have happened in cyber crimes or in physical crimes, when it used to be a manual or physical crimes, and now they are more virtual. So from the physical world, we saw a transformation that are trying to go or to transform into to move into a virtual world threat, which is facilitated by modern technology. Viruses have developed. They used to hit a single device or a certain error in a certain programming or software. Now you don't know that something has been infiltrated until your information has been leaked out. So the threats now are not on a device but on a network, and even several networks and infrastructure. The main players they started as hackers or scriptides, and they have a tendency to prepare or to develop these software, and now they're targeting, and now they are backed by countries and intelligent agencies that are also doing a lot of these attacks. Development of arms, nuclear and military establishments have and the main expenditure, or the cost of setting such threats it went down in cost. The development of technology has affected a lot. The technology has affected a lot in the spread of certain ideologies, and it can be used by evil parties or entities utilizing or making use of technological devices. And we can saw how it went up from using utilizing groups till they went to certain individuals that can post a certain video or a certain article, and then we have entities that can either do suicide attacks, or they can let's say hit and run tactics. There is no the trend here is that there are no direct confrontation. We have 3D printers that you can print weapons even, and this is, by the way, in our laboratory. This has been done in our laboratory. Any person can do that. The Internet of Things, we have a regulator, basic regulators that are used in healthcare services, that can be infiltrated. Coding and other programs, organized crime, which is benefiting today of these panels or forums to spread their evil, whether it's drugs or they use these platforms. This is what technology has been provided today. Logistic support, and some of those, one of the more important affecting factors is that we don't have entities or regulatory rules for artificial intelligence, for example. Thank goodness our country is going to be one of the first countries to set rules to organize and regulate smart or artificial intelligence. But the lack of awareness, we have to have total awareness of how to utilize and how to benefit from it. Lastly, the results of these threats, economical, social, political, or even in monetary terms, is going to affect us. How can we? Yes, technology is a double-edged sword. If we can utilize it and use it in, especially artificial intelligence, in a good way, we can process a lot of these data and utilize this technology to benefit from it for the goodness of humanity, and we have to foresee and forecast such infiltrations. So security is the responsibility of everyone and not just a single entity that is doing research on it. This is the responsibility of society in general, and it's the main component for any development and in the country. Our wise leadership vision today is based on this, and the national strategy that has been set 3 years ago is based on secure cyberspace, whether prevention and being prepared and other aspects. So our country, may God preserve it, is based on the preservance and of the security, and to preserve the gains of such security and to utilize modern technology in order to achieve that. Thank you very much for your good listening. Dr. Muhammad, thank you very much. Your presentation is always enjoyable. And now we're going to have we're going to open the panel for your questions and to answer your questions by order of our presentations regarding the 4th and 5th generation wars, including globalization and technology. I'm going to start the first question to Dr. John Lucemon. Dr. John, the 4th and 5th war generations of war are definitions or concepts used to describe the change that has occurred on how to launch wars. Has these two generations changed our current concepts of how to launch wars? And you've talked about that the Yemen war is considered a 5th generation war, although some newspapers like the New York Times called it the 3rd or 4th generation wars. So there are different definitions for the 4th generation's war from one entity to another. Could you please shed the light on this and explain it a bit more? My bad, I'm going to continue in English.
To point out the fact that there's probably an intellectual challenge to define the borders between the 4th, the 5th generation, and most of the critics about this concept were saying that it's not that simple. There isn't like a specific moment where you end up from one generation and you are now only in the 5th generation. What we see in the case of Yemen, the thing which I think is the most striking for, let's say, analysts, is to have a group, a non-state actor, supported obviously by a regional power, namely Iran, able to launch missiles, ballistic missiles. I mean, if you go back in history, ballistic missiles, this is not something that was seen as possible to be accessed by non-state actors. And to have, in terms of accuracy, in terms of range, the ability of a non-state actor to target the capital of the neighboring country, and I'm thinking here about the case where they targeted the airport of Riyadh, that's something quite new. And that's the reason why on one hand you have elements of a typical guerrilla, where the basic idea is not to have a conventional war against the coalition, but as long as they can make sure that the coalition does not achieve any obvious victory, they have their own goal achieved. And at the same time, you have this high-end technological advance with these ballistic missiles. So what I mean by that is that clearly you have a blend, a mix of elements of guerrillas with things that we would consider in the past elements of a classic, conventional state-to-state confrontation. Does it change the way we launch a war? Yes, in the sense that it is becoming, and I'm thinking here more broadly, not only about Yemen, but it is becoming more and more difficult for a state to launch a war not only against another classic threat, but against any non-state actor, because I mentioned, for instance, the concept of denial of access. We will see more and more non-state actors, terrorist organizations, that are able to deny the access to one area. We see that, for instance, with Hezbollah. If we imagine a scenario of any confrontation with Hezbollah trying to deny the access of South Lebanon, this would be extremely difficult to launch a war. And obviously the Israelis are thinking about that. They know that it would be painful, it would be bloody in terms of the loss of military forces. And this is only one case. So we would probably see that in other places where non-state actors would be able to have this kind of strategy.
So another one also, I won't say the Middle East itself, but the worldwide. Do you think the organization around the world, including Europe and Middle East, America and Asia, we have the right tools to handle the fourth wave generation, the fifth wave generation? Do you think it can be controlled?
Well, it depends if you're an optimist or a pessimist. I would say that we're still trying to cope with this evolution. And when you look at all the presentations, and especially I was fascinated by Dr. Mohammed's presentation on the evolution, especially of the young generation, their relation with technology. If we try to have like a military angle to this presentation, or to that part of the presentation, let's imagine the fighters, the non-state actors, the terrorists of 10, 20 years from now who were born and educated and trained with this technology. I'm not sure we can exactly know the way that the war would evolve, would be shaped in that situation. So what we see is most of the states, Europe, the US, and the Gulf countries are trying to understand, and that's one of the reasons I believe that this conference plays a major role, to understand the connections between all these elements, the economy, the technology, the political dimensions, because it is still evolving. So if I was pessimistic, I would tell you, no, we're not really ready, because we don't understand the nature, the evolving nature of the conflict. If I was optimist, I would say this is an ongoing process of understanding and then defining the implications for security forces.
Thank you so much. في أي سؤال من الأخوة؟
Any questions by the present guests? Please, your name and your entity that you represent. Dr. Abdul Halim Mohit, economical consultant from Ras Al Khaimah. I have a question to Dr. or Mr. Jan. You're talking about the fifth generation warfare, and Dr. Faisal is talking about the conflict. So I think the conflict has many aspects, including military warfare or cyber warfare. So my question to Mr. Jan, the GCC, how can the GCC countries in their strategic plans, how can they prepare themselves for the coming threats or future threats? Now, my other question is to all the presenters. We are coming to a new era, and I believe that all warfare from ancient time till now has an economic aspect or an economic dimension or a reason. How can we have what is the role of the national movements, and how can they shape these wars, and how can you
نسير مع العالم ناحية الحمائية أم نستمر في مسيرة التجارة الحرة؟ شكرا.
How can you advise the GCC countries in order to face these conflicts? Thank you very much.
Very quickly, you talk about the GCC. I mean, I think, and this is not only a challenge for the GCC, but if we were looking at only the GCC, and that would be probably an effort at the national level first, for each of the GCC members. First, to understand the threat and let's say the non-military dimension behind this new phenomenon. And one thing I didn't really mention in my presentation, which I would like to emphasize here for your question, is that it's not only the military that has a role to play, but the society. And we need to make sure that the civilians, the citizens, are aware of these challenges and to enforce the resilience. Because if you have, for instance, a scenario with a cyber attack targeting the infrastructures, if you have a cyber attack that is disrupting a civilian infrastructure, let's say an airport, the challenge will not be first a military response. It will be the reaction from the civilians, from the citizens, from the customers of the airport. And to make sure that all the people, the stakeholders, understand and behave accordingly. Because at the end of the day, any non-state actor, and here terrorist organizations, want to disrupt, let's say, the psychological stability of the society and targeting here civilians in a place where the military has no direct implication, no direct role, is a big challenge. So that's the way I would answer your question.
Thank you so much. دكتور عمر العبيدلي بالسؤال الثاني.
Dr. Omar Al-Baidri, the second question. Thank you very much for your intervention and question. In specific, now the GCC countries have the opportunity to enhance its reputation, while other countries in the world are trying to get rid of free trade and to get away from economical collaboration. International entities are trying to find exemplary countries that cooperative countries that are welcoming building economical bridges, which is a great opportunity for the GCC countries. And especially we have to lower or to remove all the tariffs, especially for the goods that we don't produce, while other countries are raising their tariffs. We have other commodities that we can export, because the international society, like the UN, is looking for countries or searching for countries that are exemplary, that are model or role countries that are looking more towards international collaboration. Dr. Omar, I have a question regarding
regarding digital globalization. What do you see? Where is the location of the GCC countries regarding digital globalization, and how does that affect it? Could you please explain what is the difference between digital and physical globalization? Could you have an example? I'm talking about media, social platforms. Before, we used to talk about globalization as a physical thing. But now, when we talk, for example, about Saudi Arabia, the biggest country in the Arab countries using Snapchat. So the situation is different. Globalization is reaching now children. Before, we used to talk about a more mature generation. Basically, generally, according to the history, the GCC countries are open countries in every way. For example, traditional goods and as well as the digital world. And that is a positive thing. One of the reasons why Gulf countries have been transferred from a life of poverty in the 19th century to the prosperity that we are witnessing today is that the readiness of such countries to interact with the world and welcome foreign labor and export foreign goods and import stuff like that. So we are welcoming such things, and in the digital field we need to keep going. We are now we've entered the stage of implementing the strategic visions, which is lowering our dependency on oil. So we need to hasten the technological development as soon as possible. And the fastest way to transfer knowledge from the developed side to the place that wants to be developed is technological development. So for example, I'm a researcher working in Bahrain. I have cooperation with people in the USA, in the United Kingdom, in the UAE, and I will not be able to achieve my goals without the open world or the open digital world. So So I don't really need to travel in order to exchange information, in order to have joint analysis, researches that is based on real, actual cooperation and partnership. So all of the international globalization aspects, digital globalization, is going to benefit the GCC countries. Now we're taking the last question, and we hope it's for Dr. Mohammed Al-Kuwaiti. Do you have any questions? In the name of Allah. Dr. Mohammed Rumethi, ICE college professor. My question is for Dr. Faisal and Dr. Jean-Loup. It's about, Dr. Faisal, you have mentioned some of the issues that are happening here in Gulf countries, among which is Qatar and its foreign policies, and Dr. Jean-Loup talking about the political stability in the region and in the Middle East in general. I would like to ask you to explain the United States of America's position from Qatar's situation and Yemen warfare. A while ago, Dahi Khalfan Tamim noted in a conference in Bahrain that the American role may cause instability in certain stands and certain positions, and he pointed specifically at Iraq and the Iranian empowering in Iraq. The American role is divided into two parts. In the under the Obama administration, this period has a certain sense of negativity towards very vital issues. For example, Daesh or ISIS, most of the American stance since its inception, it didn't have a seriousness in tackling with or dealing with Daesh. I remember one of the speakers, they said that ISIS is going to be like Al-Qaeda and it's not going to be bigger than that. But during the current administration, the Trump administration, the media is different, the messages are different. The announcement of, yet their announcement in the case of Qatar, USA during the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the previous Secretary of Foreign Affairs, he used to always call for finding a solution to this issue within the borders of the GCC countries. I believe with the current Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the situation is going to be different, the behavior is going to be different regarding Qatar, but I believe also that the solution is going to be a Gulf one.
Well, I mean, first, obviously, I'm not representing the US. They would not accept a French speaker to be representing them. But on Qatar, my understanding is the US and actually European countries as well, including my country, have been trying as much as possible to be neutral. They don't consider that they have anything to win to pick one side or the other. There's also the issue, which I think is from a pragmatical point of view, that these countries in the West have ties with Qatar economically, militarily, that cannot be dismantled right after such a crisis. So I fully understand that this can be frustrating when you have one of your closest allies that does not want to express or to make a stand during such a crisis. More generally, on this idea of the U.S. Being unstable or being one of the main threats in the region, I think the interesting thing is to see if Trump will be much different from other presidents. So far, despite all the rhetoric, despite all the speeches, we realize that it's not that revolutionary. So that will be my last word, sorry.
شكرا جزيلا. أشكر سعادة الدكتور جمال سند السويدي على إتاحتنا الفرصة لإدارة الجلسة الثالثة.
Thank you, Dr. Jamal Sana Swedi, for allowing us to go through this session, and thank you for the speakers, and we hope that we have benefited you. And thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
جميع المشاركين في أعمال
We thank the participants and the audience for attending the third session, and we go now for a short break and we'll come back with the fourth session. Thank you very much.